I was thinking about the power of walking away without conflict. You can have people of different vibrations, instead of being honest, like really straightforward, and saying what you really think or really feel, or how you see the situation, which you could be right in. It's not always needed, and sometimes it's best to just cut your losses and move on, and to recognize.
Well, I must say here that it's not just that simple, because I was speaking about sharing, let's say, some sort of knowledge. There are different forms of knowledge. And let's say you can't share high frequency knowledge with people who don't know high frequency, for instance. You can't share certain knowledge which requires experiential evidence, kind of. So if people aren't aware of their subtle being, how, I mean, you may describe it, you may tell them, but it's just going to be theory for them, because they have no access and no experience about it. But when it comes to personal relationships, it's very, very important to be straightforward, but at the same time constructive and nonviolent. Nonviolence is a natural form of benevolence, where you do not, or your consciousness does not oppose itself against the world. So you may say, I'm very sorry, but I feel like we don't have much in common at this point of time, and I choose to fall apart, or to not to partake in this and that. So I think there's nothing wrong in this expression. So I think that we should be courageous in this sense. When we communicate with others, we have to really communicate our understanding of the relationship, and we should communicate our issues, if we have some, or if we face certain issues in the relationship. We have to have that courage and openness and directness to actually talk about them without violence, or without outpouring our traumas onto others. It means that expressing ourselves, and whatever we suppressed, in a kind of a gradual and constructive way, saying that I don't like certain things, I see certain things in a certain way, but I'm ready to work on it, I'm ready to understand your point of view. So when you bring a dialogue, when you're trying to take the other person's opinion into consideration, when you're trying to, you're open and loving while expressing your uneasiness about certain things. So you may still remain loving and considerate over the other person, or their emotions and feelings. So they will feel then that you are not antagonistic, you're not just trying to hurt them, you are actually open to resolve things. But when you attack people and just cut them off without really explaining, this usually hurts you and them at the same time. And why it hurts both? Because we think that by physical disconnection from other people, or so-called walking away, we actually disconnect. The truth is that we don't. And so when we connect to someone, we usually feel that connection kind of invisibly, like our mind, our emotions are connected to this person, our intellect maybe, because we exchange on these levels, on these subtle levels. So let's say you're connected with someone and you exchange love messages, but you're in distance, you're not really in the same physical space, so you're not even sharing any kind of physical intimacy or physical contact. You will still be at ease, because your consciousness receives energy from them, exchanges energy with them on a subtle level, let's say, right? But when you walk away, when you separate with someone physically, roughly, why you feel the pain of a breakup, for instance, is because, or disconnection or breakage in relationship overall, is because you've created these links with their emotions, with their, you know, subtle being. And now they or you is created a blockage in that link. And that blockage or that kind of a cutting of that link creates pain, because pain means we feel separated from something or someone, and it comes from the beginning of our evolutionary cycle, when we started fragmenting and disconnecting from the whole. So if we were once a wholesome soul, with the devolution of the lower cycle, with the down cycle, we went into fragmentation. And so even though this fragmentation allowed us to find out more about different elements of our creation and existence, or how is it to live in this form or that form, we dispersed, and somewhere we lost that perception of collective unity. And that's why whenever we connect to someone, we feel sort of like as if that being completes us. And they can't complete us on a physical level, but they maybe complete us on some level, on a subtle level. And that's why we feel so-called sweetness, kindness, love, right? Because we feel in unity. But now when someone decides to walk away, it is the blockage that they have created through maybe miscommunication or some other issues within themselves, or their trauma got better of them. They created that blockage in this pipeline between you and their consciousness and your consciousness. So once you felt unified, you felt happy, you felt like it doesn't even matter whether they're here or now. Now, what's the difference between the physical separation between people who are having distant relationships, for instance, and people who broke up? Physically, there is no difference. But emotionally and consciously, there is a huge difference, because that link is obstructed now. The link between their consciousness and your consciousness, through which the energy exchange took place, is broken. Now, when you don't receive that nourishment, that energy exchange anymore, what happens to you? You suffer. So that's what happens. And so it's very, but you know, even if you created a blockage, kind of on a limited level, on a collective level, we're still somewhat connected. And so we just need to replace that sort of within ourselves. But if you're wise, you will never lose that part within yourself. You will not connect to people because they compliment you, or because they, you know, what is this word? Because they complete you, you know, because you're already complete. So you see, the maturity or the evolved being means that you connect to others through your wholesomeness, through your completeness, rather than through your incompleteness. And that's why, let's say, you will not, even if you choose to part, you will part in a decent, honorable way, or you will not part in that kind of hurtful way. Why do people hurt each other? Because their trauma, their pain reached the unprecedented level within, through this connection, through this trigger. And so they can't face it anymore. So they have to reflect it back onto you. They have to hurt you back. They have to do something rather than communicate. Communication disperses all illusions. It's very important. So it's very important to communicate rather than to think that you can just cut the connection and cut your losses with that, you know, or avoid something. Avoidance is a sign of trauma. If you are content within yourself, you will express yourself openly, and you will speak about difficult matters in a mature, direct, but constructive and non-violent way. That's what I believe. And this way you may preserve a lot of valuable relationships, because you may tell your trauma from the actual relationship. If you're very traumatized and immature, you might sometimes confuse the relationship for trauma, or you may project the trauma on your relationship and maybe sometimes miss out on understanding whether this relationship actually was valuable. So yeah, it's very important to really know yourself deeper before you enter any kind of relationships. Or if you cannot have that deeper experience of yourself, your relationships will be like a playground for your maturing, because they will reflect your immaturity, they will reflect your traumas. And even if you're immature, but you choose to communicate in an open way, you choose to go over your ego, over your trauma, and express what you feel without making other people, insecure, without threatening the integrity of a relationship, then it may help you to preserve relationships even while you're working on yourself and refining your traumas. So